Upper West Side is one of New York City's most distinctive and cherished neighborhoods. Famous for the beautiful towers of Central Park West silhouetted against the sky, for the ambiance of its long rows of brownstones, for the drama of its institutional architecture, and for the names and shapes of its world-famous apartment houses. The West Side features a quality of life that owes much of its special flavor to the architectural richness and historical nature of its physical setting. The West Side has its much-loved officially designated landmarks, the Dakota, the Ansonia, the Belle Nord, and the distinctive 72nd Street subway kiosk. But the very essence of the West Side, the features that make it such a special place, remain unprotected from insensitive change and destruction. The blocks of both sophisticated and whimsical row houses, the grandeur of Central Park West, the imaginatively designed and often ornately decorated tenements, the impressive churches, synagogues, museums, and schools, apartment houses that are among the earliest and most interesting in the city, all are vulnerable to people whose primary concern is not the beauty of our neighborhoods, nor the quality of our lives. Stripped of its architectural heritage, the West Side would be a very different kind of place. This is Tony Randall. I live on the West Side, and I love it. But I'm disturbed by what I see happening here. That's why I've joined the fight to save the best of the West. If we don't do something right away, we're going to lose the architecture and history these slides celebrate. The character of the West Side and its resulting quality of life are not the product of a few grand buildings. On the contrary, the West Side is truly a whole larger than the sum of its parts. If the Apthorpe and the Normandy and similar outstanding landmarks were the only buildings on the West Side to be preserved, we would lose the neighborhood we know and love. The West Side's special settings can only be preserved through the creation of historic districts. Such districts will ensure that new development and change will enhance rather than destroy the qualities that make the West Side one of the city's most exciting neighborhoods. The distinctive character of the Upper West Side results from its development, the harmonious blending of its building types, and its marriage of architectural styles. These all contribute to the feeling of continuity and cohesion that identify this neighborhood. The Upper West Side contains a spectacular stock of historic buildings. This largely intact architectural resource has created the Upper West Side's special ambiance. The rapid development of the West Side started with the opening of the elevated railroad along Columbus Avenue in 1879. After the completion of the L, new building projects swept away the open fields, market gardens, colonial mansions, and shanties that had characterized the area. The Dakota and several residence hotels joined the Museum of Natural History along Central Park, and row houses intended for prospering families appeared on the cross streets, on West End Avenue, and on Riverside Drive. Almost all of these homes were erected by speculative builders who commissioned designs from both little-known and well-established architects and builders in order to entice buyers. Imposing institutional structures were also built, as were commercial buildings and handsome groups of tenements intended for wage-earning families. In the early 20th century, as land values on the West Side soared, fine apartment houses began to appear. On West End Avenue and Riverside Drive, these replaced the earlier row houses. Construction on the Upper West Side virtually ceased during the Depression, and very little new building occurred until recently. The 50 years of active building, from 1879 to 1929, left an irreplaceable architectural heritage reflecting every change and fashion during that period. This unique legacy deserves to be preserved. There are several areas of the Upper West Side that architectural historians believe qualify for designation as historic districts by the Landmarks Preservation Commission. West Siders are working to achieve the designation of several specific districts. First, we will be looking at the streets of the Upper West Side from Central Park to Broadway, which are lined with a variety of distinguished buildings. The earliest development of the West Side occurred in this proposed Central Park West Historic District, that runs from 62nd Street to 96th Street along Central Park West, and in some places extends west to Columbus Avenue, and in others extends past Amsterdam Avenue. Many of the side streets in this district retain the row houses erected for middle-class families in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The earliest homes were erected in locations convenient to the elevated station. Generally, these buildings have the simple brownstone fronts with a restrained decoration that was stylish in the mid-19th century. Brownstone is a type of sandstone that was popular in New York City because it was quarried in nearby sections of New Jersey, Connecticut, and upstate New York, and could be easily transported by water to New York's harbor. Houses such as these on West 70th Street, just off Columbus Avenue, exhibit the imaginative European-inspired incised decorations found on the Upper West Side's early row houses. In the late 1880s, brownstone began to lose favor and was replaced by varicolored stone and brick, many brought by railroads in New York from far-off sections of the country. The exuberant row houses of the 1880s and 1890s, designed in the English Queen Anne and American Romanesque Revival styles, display a variety of materials on each facade, creating lively contrasts in texture and color. During this period, architects of great talent were active on the Upper West Side, and some designed houses that stand apart from the architectural norm. The flamboyant houses on West 78th Street, between Amsterdam Avenue and Columbus Avenue, form just such a row. These brick and terracotta houses display Moorish-inspired details, and fittingly were the work of Spanish-born architect Rafael Guastavino. By the turn of the century, an eclectic range of Renaissance forms had appeared on the last row houses to be erected on the Upper West Side. Coincident with the speculative construction of one-family homes was the building of tenements on Amsterdam and Columbus Avenue. The aesthetic qualities of these tenements should not be undervalued. They are often closely related to the row houses on the side streets, and many have distinguished facades with fanciful ornaments. Among the fine tenements on Amsterdam Avenue is this building on the northeast corner of Amsterdam Avenue and 82nd Street. And this trio on Amsterdam between 82nd and 83rd Street. Many of these multiple dwellings were designed by the same architects responsible for the row houses. By the last years of the 19th century, the row houses and tenements were being joined by large residence hotels. The residence hotels were built for people who did not wish to be burdened with the maintenance of a single-family house, and for out-of-towners who spent several months a year in New York. These hotels had private suites of rooms and elegantly appointed public dining rooms and lounges. The Upper West Side was a center for residence hotels, and within the proposed Central Park West Historic District are such fine survivors as the Endicott, the Brockholts, the Evelyn, and the La Rochelle, all on Columbus Avenue. Central Park West, the spine of this proposed historic district, remained largely undeveloped until the early 20th century. The Dakota and a few apartment hotels were practically the only buildings along the park in 1900. Land values were so high on Central Park West that few builders could afford the cost of construction before the West Side became established as a fashionable neighborhood. In the early years of the 20th century, however, some of New York's grandest apartment houses were erected along the park. Buildings with such elegant European names as Prasada, Langham, and St. Urban continue to lend a sense of Parisian elegance to the area. These luxury buildings were followed in the 1920s and early 1930s by the towered apartment houses that give Central Park West its world-famous silhouette. Architect Emery Roth's magnificent Renaissance-inspired Oliver Cromwell, Beresford, and San Remo apartments, and Irwin Shannon's Art Deco Century and Majestic apartments, along with such buildings as the El Dorado and Ardsley, continue to be among the most beautiful and sought-after residences in New York City. Also within this proposed Central Park West Historic District is one of the most unusual blocks in New York, West 67th Street between Central Park West and Columbus Avenue. This street is lined with early cooperatives planned by successful artists as residential studios. The cohesive design of the Hotel des Artistes and its neighbors has served to create a unique environment that has attracted Norman Rockwell, Stuart Davis, Marcel Duchamp, and many other painters, sculptors, and illustrators. The 19th and early 20th century row houses, tenements, apartment buildings, and residence hotels of the proposed Central Park West Historic District were all designed with a similar sensibility by people for whom quality of design and architectural beauty were dominant concerns. This resulted in the harmonious architectural ensemble that is today's Upper West Side. The section known as Manhattan Valley, north of 96th Street, was built up primarily with tenements and institutions. Many of the finest buildings in this area have already been demolished or altered, but a beautiful residential enclave survives in the blocks adjoining the former Towers Nursing Home on 105th and 106th Streets. The proposed Manhattan Valley Historic District consists of an exuberant group of small Queen Anne-style row houses with elaborate projecting oriels and fanciful metal cornices. Other proposed historic districts would encompass sections of the area west of Broadway. In the late 19th century, the streets between Broadway, West End Avenue, and Riverside Drive were known as the West End section. Development in the West End section began a bit later than that near Central Park, and the streets consist largely of intact rows of brick and stone houses with fine carved details. Within the proposed West End Historic District, bounded approximately by 86th Street on the south, 93rd Street on the north, Riverside Drive on the west, and West End Avenue and Broadway on the east, are some of the best preserved row houses on the Upper West Side, as well as some of the area's finest 20th century apartment buildings. Of special note are the yellow brick row houses of West 88th and 89th Street with their neo-Renaissance ornaments. The colonial revival style houses on West 91st and West 92nd Streets, and the rows on West End Avenue between 90th and 91st, which are among the few intact groups to survive on what was once a boulevard lined almost entirely with row houses. Complementing the row houses are several institutions as well as apartment houses, ranging from such early 20th century examples as these lavishly ornamented French-inspired buildings on Riverside Drive, to the taller, more understated buildings erected on West End Avenue and Riverside Drive in the second and third decades of the 20th century. To the north of 96th Street, there are several smaller enclaves lined almost entirely with early 20th century row houses. Major development did not begin in the northern reaches of the Upper West Side until the early years of the 20th century, at which time long, balanced rows of houses displaying Renaissance-inspired decoration or more sculptural French-inspired Beaux-Arts forms were erected. Intact examples of these houses stand on 101st, 107th, and 108th Streets, where the row houses are as impressive today as when they were new. Outside of these proposed historic districts are a number of exceptional buildings which must be part of any preservation plan for the Upper West Side. Worthy individual buildings on the Upper West Side include the former New York Free Circulating Library, the Metro Theater, the East River Savings Bank, the Claremont Stable, the former First Battery Armory, the apartment houses at 495 and 835 West End Avenue, details of which you see here, the Livingston School on West End Avenue, the Belle Claire Hotel, and several churches and synagogues. These buildings and the proposed historic district are all threatened. Like a sour note in a Mozart symphony, even a few unsympathetic developments would destroy the special character of any one of these proposed districts. The architectural richness of these districts can be eroded stoop by stoop, cornice by cornice, gargoyle by gargoyle. So far we have been lucky. Our losses have been painful, but few. Our luck is running out. Only to through the protection of historic district designation, can we be assured that the change in development that occurs in these special places will not compromise their aesthetic integrity? Protecting the best of the West will not be easy. However, it can be done, and Landmark West has been formed to do it. Under the auspices of the Municipal Art Society and the guidance of the distinguished steering committee of experienced West Side preservationists, Landmark West has been established to ensure the protection of the West Side's architectural treasures through the creation of new historic districts and the designation of new individual landmarks. Will such action freeze the Upper West Side and transform this vital neighborhood into a museum? Absolutely not. The city already has over 46 historic districts and over 20 years of experience in managing them. They include such vital places as Madison Avenue in the 60s and 70s, Soho and Greenwich Village. Contrary to what some people may think, changes occur in these districts. These changes, however, are sympathetic and appropriate to the architectural and historical integrity of these neighborhoods. In historic districts, windows are modernized, rooftop additions have been made, and storefronts have been changed. Last year, the Landmarks Commission issued over 1,000 approvals for major changes to regulated buildings. Time does not stop in an historic district. Its impact is just finely tuned. Changes and additions need not destroy what we now have. After designations have been achieved, Landmark West will act as the curator of the West Side, watching over the historic districts, assisting property owners, participating in the public review process, and ensuring a bright future for the West Side's landmark. Today, Landmark West needs your help, because time is running out on the still unadulterated cornices, stoops, figures, and fancy in the blocks of the proposed historic district. The organization is new, its task immense. With your energy, commitment, and enthusiasm, it can succeed. If you can contribute time, funds, or your name on a postcard, you can help. Manhattan's Upper West Side is very lucky. It still retains its architectural character and its sense of place, and the quality of life that we as West Siders value. We must mobilize today to protect it. Tomorrow will be too late. That's why I found the time to help. Won't you? With your help, the best of the West can survive.